All right. Well, welcome to Writing Better Outcome Statements. My name is Lawrence Heiner. I am the Director of Training and Technical Assistance here at Cal Kappa. And today's training is on a very, very specific focused area of Roma. Today, we're looking at outcome statements and what it is that we do with outcome statements and how we write them and how to write better ones than we have in the past. This is one of those little parts of Roma that is kind of easy to get it in the classroom, and then sometimes it gets a little foggy over time, or it's how did we do that again? So this session is really designed to be that refresher on what outcome statements are, how we write them, and how to use them. Okay, so today, in a granular way, we'll get to know when we use these outcome statements. Part of that is going to be recognizing accurate needs statements. We'll look at how we determine the obvious opposite as a skill set. It's part of this. We'll identify the components of a complete outcome indicator. And then part of that will be calculating an outcome target and then drafting a complete outcome indicator. So if that sounds like a lot, hang in there. We're going to go through these concepts one at a time. If you have taken the introduction to Roma before, some of this may be familiar, but nothing in this is shared directly out of that content. So stay tuned for some new exercises, I suppose. All right. So when do we use an outcome statement? There's a few areas. These are the ones that stood out to us initially, and I'm sure that there are other places where you can think where an outcome statement would come in handy. One of those areas is going to be in the community action plan. So when we draw up that plan, we're looking for specific language in an outcome statement. And similarly, we may roll those up into program logic models. So similar kind of language that we would use in a community action plan. We may also have program-specific logic models. If you don't have program-specific logic models today, I strongly encourage looking into that because it is a great way for at a program level to jump into Roma and start using some of the Roma tools to track progress and performance management. A couple other places you may see an outcome statement would be in the programmatic reports. So if you've got it in the logic model, stands to reason you'll see them in the reports, and then also in the annual reporting, which is very, very related to that community action plan, right? So these are some of the areas where you'll see outcome statements, where you'll use them, potentially if you're involved in any of these areas of planning or reporting. Okay. So a really important part, probably one of the most important parts of writing a good outcome statement is starting with an accurate needs statement. Now, in Introduction to Roma, we have a whole section on needs statements, right? So we're going to kind of jump ahead a little bit and suggest that we know a little bit about what a needs statement is. But there are a few tips that I have for looking at need statements and generating good need statements. So essentially what we're looking at here is when we're doing our needs assessment of the community, we're really trying to narrow down at a basic level what all of the needs are that we're finding. Okay, so and this may break into even more defined kind of categories as you draw up your plans. Sometimes they're broad, sometimes they're very, very specific. So a couple of things to note are that the first one is that a needs statement is gonna, and this is a Roma CSBG needs statement. A Roma needs statement reflects at least, well, it reflects only one of the following three categories. It's either a family, an individual would be considered part of family, it'd be community, or it would be agency level. Okay, so it'll be isolated. The need statement is isolated. The concept of the need, it may hit on all three of those areas. But when we write a need statement, if it hits on all three areas, guess what? We've got at least three need statements that we need to write because each of those audiences has a different need, and how we address that need is wildly different when you're looking at family level, community level, or agency level. Okay, so family level needs are and individual needs are strictly speaking when we're helping our clients' needs, right? And then our potential clients' needs. At the community level, we are really looking at the access to goods and services, the availability of items that people would need to live their lives in their community. And at an agency level, we're looking at the agency's capacity to deliver. So each of those three areas, very wildly different ways that we approach those needs. And that's why it's so very important that we look at them specifically and not be afraid to draw up an individual needs statement in each of those three categories if that's in fact what needs to happen. All right. So we'll learn more about that as we move along here. The second point, very related to that first one, a needs statement could be one of many similar needs statements. So as we find that there are specific needs within the community or particular sets of folks, especially when we're looking at things over time, or if we've got some very niche kind of needs in the community that we want to be able to call out in our report or in our plan, it's okay to break out each one of those needs. Again, because how we address the need may be different as we look at group by group. Now, at the end of the day, when you're doing your reporting, there may be some roll up that happens if you're finding that you've got some commonality across your data. But it's better to start at the defined level and group those things later because you can't invent it and you can't like, invent the data, right? So laying this stuff out ahead of time, this is part of when we're doing our data tracking, starting with the need, right? And looking all the way back at that level. A needs statement, this is a big clue, and this is a tip that we've got for everybody coming out of the Introduction to Roma class. It's very important that the need does not include a service or program that we offer. Right? We'll see some examples of this in just a moment. But when we say we need food, right, or we need say housing vouchers. Well, housing vouchers are part of the solution. That's not the actual need. There's something that somebody really needs, and they get that need satisfied through the use of that service. So often, if we find that we're writing that they need this service, if you take a step, just one step deeper, you start to see what the actual need is. What is some sort of change that's happening based on receiving that product or service. And that could result in a lot of different things, right? So you may address a variety of needs with the same product or service, but we want to know if it's actually addressing the need. So that's why we define it very specifically. All right, and the last tip that we've got here, often we'll see this as we're drafting needs statements that a family needs access, right? Family needs access to food. Family needs access to affordable housing. Okay, so it's a clue for us in the Roma world. It's not really that the need is not revolving around the family at that point because it's access related. That's like all families need access, right? So it's no longer isolated. Now we're looking at the community. Okay, so if it's access to something, if we feel like we're missing access to something, then we take a step back and say, okay, well, what does the community need to make that access available? Does it need additional housing stock? Does it need a grocery store in the area? Does it need a bus stop? Does it need a sidewalk, right? So there's a variety of things that we can look at the community level that could address things that are clues when we're seeing it defined through the family or individual lens, right? Just by looking at access. So if you see that term access, that's a clue, right? It's a community need. Okay. All right, let's take a look here, and we've got a simple quiz here, and this invites a little bit of audience participation. So if you want to use the chat to deliver your response, that's great. It's probably the best way to go through these. We'll go through kind of quickly, but please stop me if you've got questions about them because we're not trying to be tricky. Okay. So the first need statement that we'll take a look at here, and we want to identify as part of this quiz, is this an individual or family level need? Is this a community level need? Or is this an agency level need? All right. So what do you think for this first one? Individuals lack locally needed job skills. Right? What level of need do you suppose that could be? I'm seeing family. I'm agreeing with family. Let's take a look here. So yes, that is a family level need. All right, Karen, good. Yeah. So we got a family level need. Nice, easy one out of the gate. Okay. Number two, let's see here. The community lacks after school activities for youth, right? Is that a family, community, or agency level need? What do you think? All right, I'm seeing community, and that is correct. We got community. Okay, number three, we've only got a few of these. Number three, families need energy assistance payments. I should mention there are some curveballs in here. What do you think? See a little community. Oh, somebody put out there that it is not a need statement. And in fact, that is correct. It is not a need statement. I cannot fool this group. Oh my goodness. All right, that's great. Yeah, this is not a need statement. And why is that? It's because the energy assistance payments are the product or service, right? We were just talking about how if it's a product or service that's listed in the need statement is not a need. In this case, what families probably need is affordable utilities, right? Or they need to afford their utilities. Okay. And so this may be one of those ways that we help them out, right? Okay. Good job. All right. Number four, the agency lacks funds to expand services. That family, community, or agency level need. Agency. Can't be fooled. There's agency. Number five, families lack access to nutritious food. Is that a family, community, or agency level need? Oh, wow, we got a sharp group. I'm seeing community already. And yes, that is totally true. And why is that? That term access, right? The family lacks access to nutritious food. So that can mean we may, in fact, rewrite that need to be more clear to say what the community actually needs, right? So maybe that the community needs access to nutritious food or have an establishment for that. And we would look at things like grocery stores or potentially having food banks or something like that in the area. Very good. All right, last one, housing. Is that a family, community, or agency need? All right, there it is. None. We don't have enough detail here to tell who needs it, right? That's going to be like everybody, right? So, yeah, just stating housing is not enough. We need to be very specific. And the reason for that is because we're looking for an outcome here, right? Like if I just say housing, who gets the outcome? Well, in theory, everybody, and that makes it very difficult to track, right? So, we want to be able to track this stuff. So we'll be more specific. Okay. All right. So in order to do that, and once we've got a good needs statement, and I feel like we're on track here, right? As we get better and better at writing these need statements, when we have a good need statement, then creating an outcome statement is actually really, really simple. It's very straightforward. So if you consider the obvious opposite, this idea of the obvious opposite, we're trying to say if someone needs something, then very obviously the opposite of needing it is that they have it. Okay, it's not reinterpreting the need into something new or new language, right? We're just saying they needed it before and they have it now, right? And you can use some simple terms to differentiate those. A lot of the times in Roma, what we'll say is that individuals lack something, right? Or agencies or the community lacks something. So in this case, individuals lack transportation to work, and we'll call out that term lack. as kind of an indicator to us that this is a need statement, right? Now, to turn that into the obvious opposite and create an outcome statement, all we have to do is take that word lack and twist it around. So instead of individuals lack transportation to work, now we have individuals have transportation to work, or some other synonym to that, right? They receive it, they get it, they now have it, however you reference that, but that's the idea. It's the opposite of lacking it, right? And it's still the transportation to work. We have not changed that to individuals have transportation vouchers. We didn't change it to the community now has a new bus stop. We didn't do any of that, right? No changing. And if those are what we want, we look back to the need and see if it was actually a need, and then we convert a different need. Okay. So if we're looking at our list of needs, and we see that there's more than just this, then we can do another need and another need and another need and address them appropriately, right? So that we can track them appropriately. Okay. So let's take a look at some examples here. And in this case, if you want to come off mute to give me a reply, this one's a little bit more involved. That would be fine. So the first one that we've got here is that individuals lack locally needed job skills. So what I'd like is if somebody would like to come off mute, let me know what you would phrase as an outcome statement if individuals lack locally needed job skills. You can also type it in the chat if that's easier.
Could we say individuals have locally needed job skills?
Oh my gosh, are you like reading my slides? I swear. Yeah, it's not too hard, right? Thank you, Yesenia. It was the obvious opposite, right? How about number 2? The community lacks after school activities for youth. These are ringing a bell, I hope. So the community lacks after school activities for youth.
The community has after school activities for youth.
Oh my gosh, there it is. I know. At the risk of being, like too simple, let's take a look at a third one. Families need affordable utilities. What's the obvious opposite? Imelda, what do you think?
Is it
Okay.
families have affordable utilities?
They do indeed. Families have affordable utilities. So let's do, I've got a few more of these and I'll leave the slides with you, but the agency lacks funds to expand services. I feel like we're on a roll here. So the agency has funds to expand services. If families lack families lack access to nutritious food, the families have access to nutritious food. This one's a little, if I was actually converting this into a needs statement, I may switch that back over to community, as a matter of fact. So I'll put a little caveat there so that we interpret that into a community need from the beginning. But if we were to leave it as such, then the families would have access to nutritious food. And then the community lacks affordable housing, right? That originally we said just housing, but in this case, we narrowed it to the community. So if the community lacks affordable housing, then the community has affordable housing, and that's where we leave it, right? So the moral of this story is to resist the urge to change too much language as you switch from a need to an outcome, or we may run the risk of losing the original need, okay, through interpretation. So that's the caution. And then the solution, if you find that you're feeling like you need to change the outcome statement for some reason because it's just not fitting with things, look back at the original need, see if the original need is being addressed or if there's a different need that you're trying to address. Okay. All right. So a big reason for figuring out how to craft an outcome statement is because we then use that statement, the opposite of the need, and we put some more information into it and it becomes an outcome indicator. And this is very useful for a performance management in that it tells us when we've done our job, essentially. Okay. And it tells us if we're doing well or if we're meeting our targets, right? So when we take a need statement and create an outcome indicator out of it, we're really just adding a couple of components. So on the front end, we're adding a target number of completions, a target number of participants. Then we've got the obvious opposite of the need statement, which is the outcome statement. And then we add a time frame. All right, so this is very formulaic. It's intended to be like when you see the reports, all the reports are formulaic. This all lines up. Okay, it's all intended to do that. All right, when you're drafting things openly, like in a logic model, there's a format that that we use that makes this a lot easier to look at a glance if you're looking at lots of them, which happens to a lot of us, right? So when we're looking at a lot of targets and whether or not we're meeting them, okay? So when we're calculating that outcome target, that first thing that we enter in to make it an outcome indicator, a couple things to note, like where do you get this outcome target, right? You could pull it out of the air. That is one option, right? You could just make a wild guess. But it's preferable to use a little data, right? So if it's an existing program, we can always look back at annual report data or last year's numbers to see what the effect of the program was last year. And then we factor in any other factors that we noticed between last year and this year, lessons learned and so forth. And then we reset the target, right? So if we overestimated last year, maybe we bring our numbers into alignment with something that's more appropriate. Maybe we ran something the first time and we thought we were going to knock it out of the park, and we had a learning lesson that maybe not everybody achieves the program that signs up for the program, right? So annual report will be a great spot to go to look for that information. We can also dig into the community needs assessment. So as we're uncovering the needs in the community, that can give us an idea of the scope of the need. So if we identify that so many people need something and we may only be able to afford to address a certain portion of it, it's important to recognize that there's a larger challenge out there and we can affect this amount of it with the resources that we have today. It starts to tell a more powerful story later. But if we can prove that the changes do happen with the people that are participating, then you've got a good program on your hands, and you've got good evidence to support continuation of that program or adding additional resources to it. Okay. See that a lot. Last item that I'll put here is as we are identifying that target, you've got an 80-120 rule, right? So when you're putting in your results into the annual planning or into the annual reporting, if you exceed 120% of your intended target or you achieve less than 80% of your target, then you're required to provide some sort of response or rationale to that, right? So what happened here? Why was the target off? Okay. It's not always bad that the target was off. There are often really good reasons for not having the results that you were expecting. The closer you can get to good, the less explanations you have to deliver, right? Okay, so here's some examples of some targets that could be out there. And these get even more specific when you're looking into annual reporting and how specific outcomes are measured. That's an ongoing conversation for how that's going to look in future versions of the annual report. But in this case, what we're looking at are outcome targets that we can just identify some numbers and what the format looks like. Okay, so the first one, 198 out of 200 or 99% of individuals receive a bag of food. Okay, so we're suggesting here that we've got 200 people signed up for a bag of food, that we expect that 198 are going to walk away with one, and that in times past, for whatever reason, two folks didn't, right? I don't know, but that's our estimate. That's our target. We're sticking to it. Second one, 23 out of 46 or half of enrollees will receive a certificate of completion, right? So that is, and these are just the targets, right? So in this case, we're looking at like half of enrollees actually achieve. Looking at 12 out of 20 or 60% of job seekers will achieve increased part-time hours. So that maybe what that looks like. And then related to it, you may have multiple outcomes for a particular program. So maybe 12 out of 20 or 60% achieve increased part-time hours. Out of the same program, maybe you've got 3 out of 20 or 15% of those job seekers will achieve full-time employment with benefits. Okay, so a lot of different things going on in here. These are just examples, but the last two you could see as part of the same 20 people, register that we anticipate enrolling in a program. All right. Cool. This doesn't always work with the numbers. So how about this? Does 125 out of 100 or 125% of participants will earn a certificate in 6 months? Does that sound like a good statement? And then why or why not? All right. So the answer here is that we cannot have more people complete a program than signed up for one. Okay, so if you've got any percentages that are over 100% in your targeting, then we're overestimating the targeting, or maybe the numbers are reversed or something like that, right? So this first number cannot be more than the second number. It is, however, possible that you could have more people participate than you were anticipating. That can absolutely happen, but that happens on the results side, not when we're estimating, when we're targeting. Okay. All right. We've got a couple of things as we pull stuff together. We've got a little practice here in taking our data and then interpreting it into an outcome statement, into actually a full outcome indicator. Okay, so in this case, in this first example, we've got 2 examples here. So in this first example, let's take a look at our data. So we look at our annual report. We find that 8 out of 10 participants successfully completed a job skills program last year. And when we looked into our community needs assessment, we found that individuals lack locally needed job skills. And then we're looking back through our program information, we find our project charter that says that this is a 6-month job skills development program. Okay. So if we've got all of that information in front of us, as data in front of us, we can pretty easily turn that into an outcome indicator. It says outcome statement, but it's actually an outcome indicator. So the first part of that outcome indicator was identifying our target, right? So in this case, we'll say, well, we're looking at last year. We think the same thing's going to happen this year. So we'll stick with that. 8 out of 10 or 80% of, here comes the formula, right? So and then we need our outcome statement. So the outcome is that the opposite of the need statement, right? Or the obvious opposite of the need statement. So individuals have locally needed job skills. And then we're missing one component that really makes this an indicator, and that's the time frame that this will happen in. It can't just be open-ended. We need to have it happen in a particular time frame. So in this case, we're pulling that time frame from the project charter. We know that this is a 6-month program, so we'll say in 6 months, right? So we know that these are, or you may put by a particular date. If you know the closing date, it's even better. Okay. So that's one example. You take the information that you're pulling from different sources, and it compiles into one statement, and that's what you've got in your logic models. It's what you've got in your community action plans.
Question. I haven't done this before, so this is all kind of new to me.
Yeah.
So would that time frame always, if you, based on like, if for this case, you know how long the job training is going to take, but food, say if it was food or something, what time frame would you go off of for something like that then?
A lot of times it's going to be the grant period.
Okay, it's going
Okay.
to be.
Yeah, and sometimes it's spelled out specifically by the programs. You may have like touch points that you will measure.
Okay.
30, 60, 90 days, that kind of thing. Like that's very common in housing programs, like how long people stay in shelter. think that's coming up in our next example.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a combination of looking at the programs themselves in the pre-established timeframes, and then what you expect to accomplish. It could be like within a year, and you have multiple like run periods, so if you've got a year and you run something monthly, then you may have 12 months of data that add up, right? Or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Okay. And then this next example, maybe this will also help. So I got one more example. So in this case, we'll look back into a programmatic report that tells us that 79 out of 100 families stayed shelter for 90 days in a shelter program that we're operating. We look at the needs assessment because that's important. And we see that families experiencing homelessness lack safe shelter still. That's still a need that's out there. We didn't solve it with our 79 families last year. Okay, so and then we see that this is a 90-day shelter program, so we're going to potentially stick with that time frame. We know that in this case, we're probably reporting on 90-day periods. So in this next one, looks like we're keeping the same target again because we're looking back at our programmatic reports. So we're seeing what is realistic. That 79 out of 100 will achieve the outcome. Hey, if 100 out of 100 do it this time, then we saw an increase from last year, and that's cool too. But we're in this case, we're just sticking with the target that we know. Okay. We want to resist being overly ambitious. All right. Like, it's one thing to assert that we want to have, maybe it's an internal stretch goal that we always want to have 100%, but it's not always realistic to lay that out there. So if we state that there's 100, if we always expect that there's going to be 100% and we're consistently not meeting that target, it's not that we're doing a bad job. It's just that we're not targeting properly, and really we should be shooting for what's accurate, and then working to increase that number, rather than relying on the targeting to do it. Hopefully that makes sense. So when we're taking this, we're making the outcome indicator, we've got the 79 out of 100, or 79% of what? Got families experiencing homelessness have safe shelter, right? So it works as the program is intended to. The program's going to produce the outcome, okay? Now, in the meantime, we may track different outputs along the way so we have evidence toward that change, right? But we want to know if 79, or well, our families are safely sheltered is what we're trying to achieve. And then in how long, we've got a 90-day time frame here. So it's lines itself out for you. There are other times as you're looking through your data that it's not spelled out so specifically. You may have to interpret a little bit of your data to give you the information necessary for the outcome statement. All right. And that may come in the format of how you're targeting. So especially if it's the first year that you're getting into something, you may look at what resources you have available and then what the need is, and kind of line things up that way with your best estimate. And then in a time frame, if a time frame is not spelled out, and Karen, thank you for asking the question earlier. If the time frame is not spelled out, chances are it's the end of the grant period or a contract period. Whew. Okay, this is a lot, folks. So this is what we covered today. 6 items in total. We learned about the outcome statements, when to use them. We looked at recognizing good needs statements. We're finding out how to determine the obvious opposite, and not changing too much of that language. Identifying components of a complete outcome indicator. It's really just 3 things that target the outcome statement and a time frame. And then we calculated some outcome targets, and then looked at how to draft a completed outcome indicator. So that's the bulk of it. I'd love your feedback on this presentation, and then I absolutely want to hear what questions you have, maybe some specific examples. If you want to talk through some stuff that you've got ahead of you right now, that's fine too. There's a feedback link in the chat if you don't want to use your phone with the QR code. So what questions do you have about writing outcome statements or processing your needs assessment data to find them, or looking through your reporting? Happy to answer anything for you.
I was like, not a question, but I just wanted to say that I really liked the breakdown of the outcome indicator. I feel like it was really easy to follow, and I had never really seen it broken out like that. So I
Okay.
just wanted to say like props, because I feel like that really helps for doing it later on.
All right, appreciate that. I'll let Barbara know. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, because we train this a lot. Like a lot. So, and you know, sometimes it takes another way to look at it. Karen, do you have a comment?
It seems very simple. I haven't done it before, so I'm not even sure, to be honest, what it looks like. It's all new to me, so I was just signed up for this training, but yeah, it seems super simple. So I'm hoping that I can put it to use when I actually get there, that it'll be the same.
Yeah, you bet. And you'll get a copy of this presentation deck. So as you see terms, I'm using very specific jargon in this deck. If you search for the information, it should pop up, right? So things like outcome indicators. Outcome indicator is technically column 4 of the logic model. And column 1 is your need statement. Column 2 are the services that you offer. And column 3 is just the outcome statement by itself. Column 4 then puts those things together into a target. So yeah, as you go through any of these processes in Roma, whatever tools work for you, grab onto them. You know, it's at the end, it's all trying to do the same thing, which is track the performance of programs, and you know, help keep the resources where they need to be to continue them. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Well, keep an eye out. We're gonna continue these sort of small hits on Roma, kind of bite-sized Roma pieces. Sometimes they come in handy, sometimes they scratch an itch, you know, an intellectual itch. Just curious about how things work a little better. There is also a planning affinity group. If you are not a part of already, you may enjoy it. And our next meeting with the planning affinity group is going to be on December 12th, where we plot out next year's activities. We do a quarterly meetings, and there's a link that you can go to for any of our affinity groups that we run here at Cal Kappa. But the planning group meets about this kind of stuff, and we'll meet 4 times next year to talk about things related to planning and reporting. And that's outside of the support that's offered through CSD for the Roma folks. So when we're looking at planners, it doesn't matter if you're Roma certified or not. We're welcome all planners to the table for that one. And look forward to supporting you.
Thank you. Do you know there's an upcoming training for reporting results on December 11th? Does that have to do with the Roma and the data as well?
Yeah, that's going to be similar to this one.
Okay.
Right. So we'll go through some of the tools that we use for reporting, and what folks do to gather that kind of information, make sure that it's accurate from the beginning, right? Because
Okay.
we're about to get into a whole new program year, and so as we're wrapping up reporting now, it's sometimes an interesting exercise to see what we can do next year to be better at, you know, what we didn't do this year or something like that, right? To make reporting more accurate.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, real good. Well, folks, thank you for spending a little bit of your afternoon with me. We'll post this with the rest of our webinars on our YouTube channel and send it out to the other folks that registered for the session today. But thank you so much for your participation.